2 of AP Physics C, Force and Translational Dynamics. We're going to discuss center of mass, forces and free body diagrams, Newton's 3 laws, and various types of forces. So the first thing that we're going to understand is center of mass. And there are 3 scenarios that we need to understand for this unit. Firstly, if we have a symmetrical mass distribution, it's very easy to determine center of mass. Let's say I just kind of have a box, right? A 2-dimensional box. We are going to understand that our mass distribution, that our COM is going to lie on the axes of symmetry. So let's say I have this as my y direction and then this is my x direction. If I wanted to find the center of mass in the y direction, I would simply kind of draw an axis wherever I wanted to, just find the center in the y direction, find the center in the x direction, and that is my center of mass is right there in the middle. We could extend this to 3 dimensions, whatever you really wanted to, but if we have a symmetrical mass distribution, we just know it's going to be halfway in between the end of the box and the start, right? The second thing that we want to know, number 2, is if we have a system of masses. If we have a system of masses, there are 2 equations that we want to keep track of. The first one is that the center of mass in the x direction is equal to the sum of the masses times x over the sum of the masses, and that in the y direction, it's going to be equal to the sum of the masses times y over the sum of the masses again. So let's take a quick example. If we have our set of axes here, and we have one point that's right here at, let's say this point is -3, 0, and we have another point at, let's say this is 6, 3. Obviously we need to assign some masses, so let's call this one 4 kilograms. Let's call this one 2 kilograms. Let's see if we can find, using these equations, let's see if we can find the center of mass of this system. Okay, so what we're going to do to find, firstly, let's find the x-com. So if we want x-com, we're going to get 4 times 6, right? Because of this guy right here, we get 6 times 4 right here, plus we have -3 and 2, so -3 times 2 over here, over some of our masses, which is obviously 4 plus 2, and that is going to give us 3. And that is going to give us 3. Now our sum in the y direction is going to be 3 times 4 plus 0 times 2 over, again, 4 plus 2, which is going to give us 2. So using this x coordinate and using this y coordinate, we can see that the center of mass of our system is at 3, 2. So using our 3 over here, our 2 over here, we can say that the center of mass is at x equals 3 and y equals 2. Okay, so our third scenario here is if we have a non-uniform density, right? It's not a symmetrical mass distribution. And if that's the case, then we can use the equation rcom is equal to the integral of the r's times dm over the integral of the dm's. And you'll notice this is very, very similar to this equation that we had up here. We've just replaced our summation signals, our sigmas, with integrals. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a quick 1-dimensional rod. We're going to assume that this direction is kind of just negligible, and we're going to have the r direction going this way. Now, in these scenarios, what we're going to have is we're going to have a lambda, and we can set lambda equal to m over l, which is also equal to dm over dr, right? Now what we can do here is we can make a substitution, right? We can set lambda is equal to dm dr, therefore dr lambda is equal to dm, and then we can replace these dm's with this substitution. So what we're going to get then is we're going to get rcom is equal to the integral of r lambda dr over the integral of dr lambda. In a lot of cases, you may also get an additional equation for lambda. The problem may state that lambda is equal to something like beta r cubed. In that case, you'd simply substitute this in and solve the integral. And that's all you need to know for center of mass for AP Physics C. Okay, now we're going to discuss Newton's laws. The first of which states that an object at rest will stay at rest, and that an object at a constant speed will stay at that speed, both of these assuming that no forces act upon this object. So let's say I have an imaginary particle traveling through space and it's far away from any planets or black holes, so there's no gravitational forces that can be exerted on it. So it's kind of just coasting through space, and let's say it's going 300 kilometers per hour, right? That particle is going to continue moving at 300 kilometers an hour through space unless something happens to it, right? Unless a black hole sucks it in, unless a planet pulls it into its gravitational field, etc., right? That particle will continue moving until something happens, until a force acts on it and causes acceleration. Conversely, if I have a particle in space that's just kind of sitting there at 0 kilometers per hour, it's also not going to move until something acts upon it, until a force acts upon it. All right, let's take a look at Newton's second law, which is very simple. The sum of the forces is equal to ma. Hopefully at some point in your study of physics, you've already seen this equation. That's pretty much all it is, very simple. And the third one states that whenever we have a force B on A, it is equal to the negative force of A on B. So if I push somebody, there's an equal and opposite force exerted in the opposite direction, right? An equal and opposite force. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Cannot stress that enough. Okay, so the first force that we're going to formally discuss in this video is Fg. We know from our reference table that Fg is equal to Gm1 m2 over r squared. Fg always acts on the center of mass, and it points towards the line connecting the COM of the two systems. So let's say I have a little imaginary planet and I have a little person standing on top of it. The Fg is going to point down towards this center of the mass of the planet right here, right? And that is the Fg of the Earth acting on the person. Of course, every object exerts some gravitational force, but we know that in most cases it's negligible, right? I, in my chair, am not exerting a great gravitational force on the Earth. Another thing that we should note is that if we have ma, right, which is the sum of the forces from our Newton's second law, is equal to Gmm over r squared. Again, we can just write this m1, m2 as little m, big M if we want to. Then we can cross out little m and we can get that A is equal to Gm over r squared when gravitational force is the only force acting on a person. This is also known as little g, and it usually has a value of 9.8 meters per second squared or 10 meters per second squared. You can also use 9.8165 if you would like to, whatever works. This is also often referred to as weight. In later units, we will deal a little bit more with gravitational force, but that's all you really need to know for now. The second force that we're going to keep track of is Fn, which is known as the normal force or the apparent weight. It is always perpendicular to the surface that the force is exerted on, and it's often equal to mg. Let's say I have a box on a plane that cannot be pushed through. All right, we have mg is always going down, and then we have Fn is actually pushing up, right? If we draw our little free body diagram here. And in this case, the magnitude of Fg is equal to the magnitude of Fn. However, if I was to have an inclined surface like this one, and the box was kind of on here, right, then mg again is going to be straight down, right? However, Fn will always point perpendicular, so it's still going to be this way. In this case, we would have to say, if we drew our free body diagram, kind of rotate it a little bit, get something like this, right? We could say that Fn is equal to mg sine theta, right? Because we've established that Fg is equal to Gmm over r squared, which is also equal to mg. All right, so our next forces that we're going to study are static and kinetic friction. They use essentially the same equation, which is that Ff is equal to mu Fn. Mu Fn is the coefficient of friction. It's commonly between 0 and 1, but it can get up all the way to 4 if we have two very frictiony surfaces, right? Now, there are two types of friction. We have static and kinetic friction. If we have static friction, it means the box is not moving or whatever object is not moving. If we have kinetic friction, that means it is moving. So let's say we have a box on a surface and it is being pulled by some sort of Ft. That means that there must be, if it's still at rest, there must be some force that is opposing it in the x direction as well. We're going to call that friction Ff. Right, and if it's at rest, it's called static because the box is static, right? It's not moving. And what happens when we have a graph of Ff, right? We see it increases right? And then it decreases as soon as the maximum static friction is approached, and then we have kind of a lower result for kinetic, right? Once the Ft becomes so great that it overcomes the force of friction, the box just kind of starts moving, and we get a slightly lower friction. So again, kinetic is when the box is moving, or whatever object is moving, but it's still exerting a force of friction to slow it down. Static is when the force of friction is so large that it's actually preventing the direction of motion, right? It's preventing Ft from, having an effect on the box and making it move. Another force that we should take a look at is the spring force. Fs is equal to negative kx and is essentially what's called a restoring force. So let's say I have a box that is attached to a very poorly drawn string on a wall, right? If I stretch the box out this way, then the Fs is going to exert some sort of force to try to bring the box back to its natural position, right, before I stretched it out. That's a pretty simple one to deal with. The next thing that we're going to discuss are centripetal forces. And we have discussed this briefly in the video before, but Fc, or centripetal force, is equal to mv squared over r, which is equal to ma sub c, which means that AC, if we cross out our m's, is equal to v squared over r, right? When we have an object that is in circular motion, we're going to have an AC pointing in, a centripetal force going in, even if, and then we have our velocity going this way. We have a tangential acceleration going this way. Okay, so let's do an example. Let's say we have a circle, and around that circle is a little car, and we want to find the maximum speed of the car without the car slipping. So let's draw our FBD, and I haven't really explicitly mentioned this, but FBD is essentially just draw the arrow that the force is pointing on and where it's pointing from. So here we're going to have Fn going up. We're going to have FF kind of pointing in, right? That's going to be our centripetal force. And then down we have mg. So we know that our sum of the forces in the y direction is 0, right? Because the car is not floating up and it's not sinking into the ground either, right? So we know that Fn is equal to mg, especially because they're also, they are going in the same axes. There's no angle there. So that means that the sum of the forces in the y direction is equal to 0, which is equal to Fn minus mg, right? So that means that Fn, as we've previously concluded, but just confirming, is equal to mg. We know that our sum in the x direction is simply equal to Ff because both of these forces do not act in the x direction at all, right? Which is equal to mv squared over r, which is equal to mac, which is also equal to mu mg, because we can make this substitution, right? It's not just mu fn anymore, it's also mu mg as well. So now we can kind of use these two guys and put these two together. We can say that mv squared over r is equal to mu mg, cancel our m's. We're going to get that v is equal to the root of g r mu. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is probably the most important part of forces, and that is drag. This is like the one new thing that you're going to learn in Physics C besides center of mass for forces, and it's really, really important. So here's the concept of drag. Let's say that I'm on the top of a really, really, really tall skyscraper. This is me, and I'm going to throw a ball. As this ball continues to kind of just go down the skyscraper, it's going to approach a point in time where it approaches its terminal velocity. What is terminal velocity? Well, terminal velocity is when the ball stops accelerating, right, like it should, and it reaches a constant velocity. So let's say that velocity is like 50 meters per second or whatever, right? That's pretty unrealistic. But let's say it just starts moving at a constant velocity. It's not changing anymore. What does that mean? That means our forces must be equal. But what force is counteracting mg, right? In Physics 1, we kind of qualitatively understood air resistance as something that's going to slow something down. So if I'm like a bird and I'm coasting through the air, air resistance is eventually going to make me slow down if I stop flapping my wings, right? In AP Physics C, we're going to look a lot closer at air resistance. And air resistance is actually the force that's opposing the direction of motion here. It's actually opposing mg. What does that mean? It means that mg at terminal velocity is going to be equal to bv, right? This is our sum of the forces equation, right? Okay, so now that we've established that our sum of the forces, right, is equal to mg minus some drag force bv, we can set this equal to ma. We can also set it equal to mdv dt, as we know from kinematics. And if you haven't taken Physics C yet, you might not recognize this, but if you have taken Physics C, or if you are also taking an advanced mathematics course, you might be able to tell that we're entering a differential equation right now. So we're obviously going to try to separate our variables, get our v's with our dv, and to do that, we're just going to do a little algebra first. And now we're going to make an interesting substitution. So we're going to say that instead of b over mg, we're going to say mg over b is equal to vt. Meaning that we now have 1 over vt, right, minus v on one side, which is equal to b over m dt dv. We're going to then cross out our dv's, and we're going to get a dv over here. So now we can make an integral, right? Our friendly integral. So we're going to go from 0 to v of 1 over vt minus vd with respect to dv is equal to the integral of 0 to t of b over mt. Okay, so we're going to get just b over mt here, pretty simple integral, right? And then over here on this side, we're going to get ln of vt minus ln of vt minus v, right? We can kind of transform this over here into ln of vt minus v over vt equals negative b over mt. Raise everything to the e power, we're going to get 1 minus v over vt equals e to the negative b mt, which means that vt times 1 minus e to the negative b mt equals v. Then if you wanted to, you could substitute your mg over b back into vt. And so we've successfully solved our drag equation. Now, on the AP, there might be some variations to this drag equation. You might see something a tiny bit different, probably nothing too crazy. Maybe we're throwing the ball up and then down, there's some initial velocity, whatever. This is essentially what you want to know, is you want to know how to take this sum of the forces equation, transform your A into a dv dt, separate your variables, etc. And that is the end of Unit 2 of AP Physics C.